Ladies and gentlemen, Morgan State University is highly privileged and exceptionally honored this morning to have as our commencement speaker one of the most notable and prominent political leaders of our time, former U.S. Senator and former Vice President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, Jr. Now, we all know where he's from, but I want to acquaint you with his background because Vice President Biden is not ashamed, if you will, to claim Scranton, Pennsylvania as the place that bore him and shaped him and raised him. And he is a graduate of the University of Delaware, where he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in History and Political Science. He went on to Syracuse University, where he took the Juris Doctorate degree. And he was inspired by the words of the inaugural address of President John F. Kennedy to embark on a career in politics and public service. And after a brief period of practicing law in Wilmington, Delaware, he won a seat on the Newcastle County Council in 1970, and after serving 2 years there, he was elected to the United States Senate, thereby beginning his 36-year tenure as the sixth youngest member of the Senate. He was reelected to the Senate 6 times, and he became known for his expertise on foreign policy and his diligent work for justice and peace. As a member and chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he gained a reputation as one of the Senate's strongest advocates for national security, for international arms control, for economic sanctions against South Africa, for the protection of the environment and laws against violence toward women. Senator Joe Biden, the longest-serving senator from Delaware in history, retired from the Senate in 2009 when he was sworn in as the 47th Vice President of the United States, as a result of the historic election of the Obama-Biden team. For 2 terms, he served with distinction as behind-the-scenes advisor and confidant to the president, and he played an active role in policy formulation, and especially with respect to foreign policy, the economy, gun control, and tax relief. As both senator and vice president, Joe Biden worked assiduously for world peace and stability, for government integrity and accountability, for bipartisanship in local and national government, and he worked to raise living standards of middle-class Americans. He also worked to reduce gun violence, to address violence against women, and to end cancer as we know it. In the words of President Barack Obama, Joe Biden was the best vice president that America ever had. And you can't get any more high praise. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving an enthusiastic Morgan State University welcome to our commencement speaker, the Honorable Joe Biden.
Dr. Wilson, Mr. President, it's great to be here at Morgan. I tell you what, I was sitting next to your chairman of your Board of Regents, my friend, former colleague, and talking about, I became acquainted with Morgan long before this day. I worked on the east side of Wilmington. I was one of 13 lifeguards in a big swimming pool, and I was the only white boy. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. And I used to have to sit there in the locker room hearing whether or not it was Grambling or the University of or Delaware State or Morgan State, or went on and on and on. I grew up feeling self-conscious I didn't go to an HBSU. I didn't know what the hell was the matter with me. But I became really good friends with a Hall of Famer here at Morgan State, a guy named Spencer Henry. And Spencer Henry was a quarter miler. And he, in the indoor meet, I believe he beat Henry Carr, who won the world championship then. And so that's when I decided Morgan State was probably the best. But at any rate, Dr. Gibson and Michael Cryer, your alumnus of the year, I would begin to question the judgment of the choice of Michael. I've known Michael a long time. Michael was the co-chairman of Biden for president, so you have to wonder about his judgment. Congratulations, Michael. Your support has been great. And April Ryan, White House correspondent, honorary degree. I'm sitting next to her and she's trying to interview me. I don't know what's going on here. I have one regret, she never got to interview me in the White House. Anyway, deans, faculty, staff, Morgan State, good morning, Bears. First off, to all the proud parents and grandparents in the stands, family members sitting in the audience with your hearts bursting right now, I want to say congratulations to you. You did it. You raised children who are part of the best educated, most talented generation this country has ever seen. And the good news is, today you get a pay raise. No more tuition. And I want to ask the graduating class of 17, stand up and let them know how much you appreciate them. You owe them big, guys. Look, I find commencement speeches the most difficult ones to give for three reasons. One, you students just want to get the heck out of here and party. The faculty says, oh my God, this is my 71st commencement. Oh God, make it short. And all you parents want me to say something significant. Best commencement speech I ever heard, I was in graduate school. Just before I graduated, there was a guy named Bob Hope. He was the commencement speaker at Georgetown University. It was the middle of the Vietnam War. He stood up, addressed the faculty, talked about all the famous people that were in the audience. Then he turned and he said, to the graduating students, I think it was the class of 68, I'm not sure. To graduating students of class of 68, don't go. And he sat down. I'm inclined to give you the same speech. 150 years. 150 years of proud students coming together, finding the moral and intellectual elevation for which your founders dreamed. 100 years here in Northeast Baltimore, building not just a campus, but a community of history and tradition that has and continues to push our country to a better place. The first sit-in and civil rights movement happened when a Morgan State student fought to integrate Reed's drugstore lunch counter. It's what got me engaged. It got me engaged in the first sit-ins I was involved in as a high school and then college student. There's history here, American history. And now after 4 years of eating at the RACAC, 4 years of celebrating I Love Morgan Day, 4 years of singing together with each victory, I'm so glad to go to Morgan State. You too are now part of that history. This is a great HBCU. And you've been taught here to think critically, encouraged to challenge orthodoxy, exposed to diverse points of view, and challenged by your professors who demanded of you not just passage but excellence. Morgan State has instilled in you not only a sense of who you are as an individual, but pride in being part of the traditions and history of the black community in the United States of America. Morgan State teaches you, take no mess. It does. It did. Think back on your first days on campus as a brand new freshman. Gulami and I were talking about it. We were both first in our generation to go to college. I remember walking on campus feeling intimidated, wondering, did I belong here? I went to a good school, I got good grades, but I still wondered, did I belong here? I remember my dad, who was a good and decent man, was embarrassed to take me on college campuses because he didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to expose that he didn't know more than his son about college. Freshmen, that's who you got here, freshmen. Maybe still overwhelmed at being in college, filled with that constant beat of Morgan energy and pride. Think back on the walk you made from Murphy Fine Arts Center to Holmes Hall. Your Promethean walk. Really, think about it. Think what you were thinking then. Remember all the obstacles you faced to keep that candle aflame. The wind, the distance, the senior class. But you made it. And you helped one another. Every time your candle went out, somebody helped you relight it. And so, you made it not just to Holmes, but you made it here to graduation day. You came of age during the years of Barack Obama's presidency. For 8 years, I got to see up close what you saw from afar. I spent 5 to 7 hours a day with him every single day. I was always got to be the last guy in the room. I saw a man with incredible integrity and dignity, earning great international respect for the United States of America. That's what he did. That's who he is. And Michelle Obama, she radiates grace and intellect, setting the example for how each of us, how to live our American values every day. I know all those memes you guys did and sent out. But it's the truth. We're the closest of friends. Our granddaughter, my granddaughters and his daughters, are best friends. They vacation together. They're at each other's homes. They still are close. Michelle and Jill. It was a coming together that I never fully anticipated. But I believe it's critically important to know, as a nation, to know, for all of our kids to grow up knowing that someone who looks like them can ascend to the highest office in the land and do the best job any president has done in recent history. It's not just theory, it's reality. But you all know it wasn't enough. Our work is so far from done. We elected and re-elected a black man president, but at the same time, 20 states enacted new laws to make it harder for people to vote. And then, this past election cycle churned up some of the most ugly realities. Civilized discourse and real debate gave way to a coarseness in our rhetoric and a stoking of our darkest emotions. We saw just how much of a grip racism and sexism still has on America. And of course, no one has to tell you about the daily indignities of discrimination. Your parents and grandparents really lived it, but you still live it in subtle ways. We all knew Obama's election wouldn't end that overnight, but I suspect even you are surprised not by the fact that racism still exists, but by the way racism was embraced as a political tool on the national level. I thought we had passed the days where it was acceptable for politicians to say out loud, to bestow legitimacy on hate speech and fringe ideologies, playing to people's fears, appealing to their baser instincts, rather than, as Lincoln said, to the better angels of their nation. It can still be a powerful force in American politics. We saw how appeals to the forces of populism stoked anxieties, seeking to blame the troubles of a rapidly changing world on the other, the outsider, the immigrant, the minority, the transgender. Anyone not like you became the scapegoat. It's the reason I'm failing, the reason I'm falling behind, the reason I can't compete, the reason I lost my job. And it's all a bunch of malarkey. None of it is true. But I imagine it felt a little like your candle had been blown out. Maybe even like someone trying to take that candle away. And that you might feel the temptation, you graduates, to withdraw, to write off the system as irredeemably flawed. It's understandable, but I assure you, if you remember nothing what I say today but this, I assure you, it is temporary and it is transitory. It will not be sustained. The American people will not tolerate it. I want to remind you of the words of Dr. King that he spoke right here at Morgan to the class of 1958. He told them, quote, "Tensions which we witness in the world today are indicative of the fact that a new world is coming into being. Today, once again, we're living through the emergence of a new world and all its accompanying tensions. You're graduating into a world and a country where structural income inequities persist, a country where there's a desperate need to deal with the greatest threat to our generation, climate change, and you have deniers. A country where we still need to change the culture around how we treat black lives, because black lives do matter. It has to be said. I'm not being solicitous. If you know anything about me, this is what I've been saying my whole life, my whole career. It has to be said over and over again because racism is the original sin of this country. And yes, we made progress, but it's still deeply embedded in our culture. Police departments, criminal justice systems, and education, housing, hiring practices, and so much more. But this challenge has tested every generation. And now it tests yours. But you have an advantage. So much progress is made since your parents may have sat where you do. But most importantly, you're in a better position than anyone who has gone before you to break down the remaining barriers. You're graduating into a world where everything is changing so rapidly, and it is frightening, but it also gives you the power to take history in your own hands and bend it slightly. only in times of change and great inflection points is their ability to bend history. You're better equipped than any generation was to tackle these problems. There's more power in an iPhone than the computers that sent a man to the moon. 3D printers are restoring tissue after traumatic injuries and now actually beginning to replicate body parts that can be transplanted into people's bodies. Software translates real-time conversation into multiple languages. Technology is here to fight and defeat climate change. And I promise you, the cure for cancer is around the corner. Ladies and gentlemen, graduates, you have a chance to be the next Bob Johnson or Reginald Lewis or Congressman Mafumi or Michael Cryer or April Ryan. You have a chance to be the next Barack Obama. He was no better positioned than any one of you are today. As a matter of fact, I would argue, maybe not as well positioned. You're equipped with the capacity to achieve whatever you dream, and that's not hyperbole. That is literally true. So go after your dreams. Follow your ambition. But in the process, you're going to confront not only institutional barriers, but personal challenges. Personal challenges. I've met a lot of successful people throughout my career. Some were successful and happy, but most were successful and not happy. I've met every world leader without exception in the last 36 years. And I've made some basic observations about those who manage to be happy and successful. Those who are able to balance life and career and find fulfillment and purpose in what they do. There's no silver bullet, no single formula, no reductive list, but they all understood that happiness and success come from the accumulation of 1,000 little things built, as the Congress has said, on character, all of which have a few common features. First, a good life is about being personal, about being engaged, about being there for a friend or colleague when they're injured in an accident. Remember to congratulate them on a marriage or a birth of a child. Being there when they're in trouble. Being available when they're going through personal loss or failure. That's the stuff that fosters relationships, breeds trust in everything you do in life. If you can build real relationships, even with people you vehemently disagree, you'll not only be happier, you'll be a hell of a lot more successful. The second feature I've observed that they had in common was a deep-seated, intrinsic belief that no one is better than they are, but they are no better than anyone else, and everyone, as my father would say, deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone, everyone, everyone. As I said, I've worked with 8 presidents and hundreds of senators. What I found is these scores of talented people have worked for me as well. Here's what I observed. Those who had the most success or the most respect were the ones who never confused academic credentials with gravitas or judgment. I know a lot of really stupid, bright people. I'm not joking. I know a lot of stupid, brilliant people. Remember the neighborhood you came from. Remember those who didn't have a chance. Their instincts, their dignity, they are capable of extraordinary things if you give them half a chance. Respect them. And don't forget the things that don't come with this degree. What doesn't come with is the heart to know what's meaningful and what's fleeting. The head to know the difference between knowledge and judgment. But even if you get all these things right, remember this third thing. Ambition without perspective can be a killer when reality intrudes, and it will intrude. I got elected in an improbable year. I wasn't even old enough to be sworn in. I was 29 years old. Come from, I guess, I didn't realize it, but I never thought of it as a lower middle class family. The second youngest person popularly elected to the Senate in history. That's the stuff that can fuel raw ambition. And if you're not careful, a sense of inevitability creeps in. But be careful. Things can change in a heartbeat. 6 weeks after I was elected, hiring staff in Washington on December 18th, I got a phone call. A monotone voice telling me, your wife and daughter are dead. Your 2 sons, I don't know. A tractor trailer had broadsided them, and they were dead. But because I had an incredibly good fortune of having an extraordinary family grounded in love and loyalty and a sense of obligation which they imparted to me, I got a lot of help. I was embraced. Focusing on my sons who survived was my redemption. But I came away realizing there are tens of millions of people every day that got up this morning by themselves, going through what I and many of you have gone through and worse. As my deceased son Bo would say, just putting one foot in front of the other. Understanding that a child can hold on to an important thought or something they want to say to their mom or dad for maybe 12 to 24 hours, but if you miss it, it's gone. Everybody asks why I made over 8,300 round trips, 259 miles a day to go home to Wilmington, Delaware, which I did. I did it because I needed my children. I needed to be able to lie down with them at night, even though they were already asleep. Get up in the morning because they had something to say. That's the only time. It was for me, not them. Some of you have already been affected by your own unimaginable crises. The truth is, you'll all go through something really difficult. You'll wrestle with these kinds of choices every day, and along the way, it helps a great deal if you can resist the temptation to rationalize. Rationalize. I realize it's her birthday, but this business trip is a great opportunity. I know it's his last high school game, and he wants me there, but I've got this chance. And I'll have to fly all night to get back to the coast to be able to see it. He'll understand. We can always take this vacation we've been planning. Another time. For all of you and your generation, there's an incredible amount of pressure on all of you to succeed. Take this job, live in this place, hang out with the right people, take no real risks, and have no real impact. But you've got to resist the temptation of what others view as the right choice for you. Follow what you feel in your gut. That's your North Star. Trust it. To be successful and happy, you have to be willing to run the risk of failure in the service of what matters to you, no matter what anyone else thinks. You can't erect a bubble around you and your family. What happens in your community affects you. Your sister is a victim of domestic violence. You are violated. Your brother can't marry the man he loves. Your life is lessened. Your best friend has to worry about being racially profiled. You live in a circumstance not worthy of us. If you can't breathe the air, there's no place to hide, no matter how well you do. So engage the world around you, because you'll be more successful and happier, and because that's how progress happens. Let me end by telling you a story about a man who changed my life. His name was Jim Gilliam, Morgan State, class of 48, father-in-law to our current regent, Linda Gilliam. And Linda, you must be so proud knowing that Morgan State just named the College of Liberal Arts. And after your husband, Jimmy Jr., a great civic leader and dear friend in his own right. You know how much I love Jimmy, and you know how close I was to your father-in-law. In my final year of law school, when I came home from Syracuse, Dr. King had been assassinated that spring, late winter. My city of Wilmington went up in flames. We have the 8th largest African American population in the country, 19.5%. We're the only city in America since the Civil War occupied by the military. As I strode across the stage receiving my diploma in '68, Robert Kennedy had been murdered, my only political hero. And my state was in turmoil. I moved back to Delaware, and I got one of those jobs, those white shoe law firm jobs. The oldest law firm in the state, a fine law firm, very prestigious. I studied for the bar, which was taken in September, and I passed. And one day it hit me as I walked by, folks standing in the corner with bayonets. This is not what I'm supposed to do. So I remember walking into the basement of a building that contained the public defender's office. And a guy named Franny was running it, and I said I wanted a job. He said, "Don't you work for Prickett?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "I want a job." So I left my law firm and became a public defender. At the same time, Jim Gilliam Sr. from Baltimore had just moved to Wilmington. He already had a great civil rights record, activist and leader. When the National Guard was occupying my city, Jim was one of the few people allowed outside, walking the streets, keeping the peace. He was also talking to politicians and government officials, ensuring that the concerns and fears of the black community were being heard. Taking risks, he told me, was necessary. After about 5 months, I was one of those guys that walked along with him all the time. So I left the courtroom and go back out with Jim. And I must tell you, I worried whether or not things would ever get better. 20% of my town was burned to the ground. Would it ever get better? Jim said it would, but I didn't believe him. But I had no choice but to keep trying. And then 40 years later, almost to the month, in January, it was to the month, almost to the day, I was standing in the Wilmington train station at the end of the platform, overlooking East Lake and Riverside, the east side, where I spent my time walking around and defending people. People who would be brought to the train station to be interrogated. And all of a sudden it hit me. My son was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. And my other son, Hunter, is the brightest man I've ever known. My daughter runs the largest nonprofit for criminal justice in Delaware. And I was at the end of the platform. And they walked up to me. And it hit me. Here I was, 40 years later, looking out on the place that I had cut my teeth on, waiting for a train, carrying a black man from Philadelphia with tens of thousands of people on the streets in Wilmington to pick up this kid, Joe Biden, to travel 128 miles to be sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. So don't tell me there's no change. Don't tell me things cannot happen. Don't tell me you can't do it. Don't tell me we cannot fully, totally succeed, and it's your job to get it going. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Well, let's give it up for Joe Biden. Vice President Biden, on behalf of the class of 2017, we thank you so much for delivering those truly inspiring and uplifting remarks this morning. We truly appreciate your taking the time from what we know is a very busy schedule to be with us today. And we want you to know that Morgan State University is a place to which you may always return and find yourself welcome. In fact, we want you to call your home away from Delaware Morgan State University. Please join me once again in giving a round of applause to Vice President Joe Biden.